For more on the conflict in Israel, let's bring in our panel of experts, Natan Sachs, Director of Brookings Center for Middle East Policy, and Stephen Cook, Senior Fellow for Middle East and Africa Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations. Natan, I guess I'll follow up on what Raf was just talking about, and that is the possibility of that urban corridor warfare. Does that seem likely at this point, given some of the dynamics around these hostage extractions, what they'll need to be?
Sooner or later, it's very likely. The question is, of course, when. The mood in Israel, I think this is the main point, is completely different from previous rounds. This is not another round. This, for Israel, was a 9/11 moment, and what seemed like prohibitively costly just on Friday now seems very likely. Israel will enter in a ground operation. It will probably be a massive one. The question is when and how. The main complicating factors, and there are two. One, of course, is the many, many hostages inside the Gaza Strip, including, we now know, babies, actual babies in the hands there of Hamas, and people of all ages, genders, etc. And they're probably spread out as human shields in the Gaza Strip. This makes any ground offensive extremely complicated, and it was complicated to begin with. The second complicating factor is the threat of a second front, and that's the northern front. Hezbollah in Lebanon is significantly more powerful than Hamas and has already started a bit of fighting and has signaled that it may join the fray. That's part of what the United States is trying to deter. If it does, it's a completely different ballgame. It will be an absolute nightmare not only in Gaza and in Israel, but also in Lebanon. That is the big question in front of the Israeli government, how to balance what they see as an imperative to go in, try to get out the hostages, and also deal a tremendous blow to Hamas, with the hostages, the danger to them if they go in, and the danger of Hezbollah getting involved.
Stephen, Natan mentions the northern border. Headlines today about the risk of the conflict spilling over into the Egyptian border. That's something the market's trying to wrestle with right now. Where do you think the risk is greatest?
Well, obviously, Carl, the risk is greatest along that northern border. The Hezbollah is armed with over 100,000 rockets that can reach all parts of Israel. And Hezbollah and its patron, Iran, has threatened Israel. In fact, Iran, by all indications, has had a hand in what Hamas has done. So that is the expectation. The question of what happens along the Egyptian border is really something that Egyptians are likely to shut down very, very quickly. What the Egyptians are worried about is there being some sort of breakout that tears down their own piece of the wall that is part of this blockade of Gaza. But I think that we should be significantly less concerned about what happens in Gaza, in the south, with regard to Egypt, and much more concerned about Lebanon. There was, as you remember, and I believe, if I remember correctly, you covered the war in 2006 and were there. That was a very, very different challenge for the Israel Defense Forces. Hezbollah is essentially a expeditionary force and an arm of the Iranian regime. And to be fighting along two fronts is a significant challenge for the IDF.
Stephen, just to follow up on that, what about the potential alliances and where they stand, both with Israel and the West, as well as Hamas and some of its allies? What do you see in terms of a potential escalation on that front? It's been a few days since the Wall Street Journal reported Iran's involvement in helping plot the attack, and I know a lot of the details are important here, but just kind of as you're assessing where things stand right now with regard to overall global involvement.
Well, certainly Israel is enjoying unprecedented backing from the Europeans, as well as what you would expect from the White House, which is promises of resupply of equipment, as well as political and diplomatic support. Major countries in Europe have also indicated their political support. The question about European support and other support is how long an Israeli ground operation goes on and how many civilian casualties. There is a pattern here in which the international community seeks to restrain Israel before it can reach its goals. As Natan pointed out, there is a strong political support in Israel for bringing an end to this Hamas threat once and for all. So that will probably give the Israeli government some more room to run than they otherwise would have. As far as Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran goes, that is, as I mentioned, the major threat. And one of the reasons why President Biden ordered the Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier battle group into the eastern Mediterranean as a form of deterrence to warn off Hezbollah and Iran from widening this conflict. Whether they got the message or not, we'll know in the coming days and weeks.